Hi guys, Dan here from Wellness Academy. Welcome to today's show. Really excited to bring you today's interview. Met today with a guy named David Mack. David Mack is the head coach at Wellness Academy, and I'm not going to say too much more. It's a fantastic hour spent talking to him. I really enjoyed it. Have a notepad ready and enjoy. David, welcome to the Wellness Academy podcast.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much for being here.
Good to be here.
I wanted to start off with you giving us an idea about where your passion for wellness has come from. So,
oh my goodness.
One simple question, which I think has quite a long answer. So I know that you're the head coach of the Wellness Academy, but I also know that you didn't just click your fingers and arrive at that point. And I remember, you and I met for the first time like a couple of months ago. And I wouldn't personally have gone, wow, this guy was commissioned in the Royal Air Force. And that was like, wow, not just a very impressive guy coming across, in 2019 in the brief times we've met, but also I'm sure many people can agree to be a commissioned officer. And there was a lot of story around that you felt led to where you are now. Yeah. I was already interested. I'm happy to be more interested. Let me know.
Yeah, I think it's more about people fulfilling their potential.
Okay.
So my passion is to try and help people live to their full potential, and I think everybody would feel that they would like to be as well as healthy as possible, and therefore fulfilling their potential and desires, whether it's at family, whether it's health, whether it's at work. And that is part of being well, is helping them to fulfill the potential. Now, if you explore where that came from, that's from deep within my background, really. I left school without many qualifications, I think, as you sort of alluded to. And I was the also-ran at school. I came in 11th in the cross-country team when the first 10 counted. So I was reserve in the football team. So at the... with the prize day, I never got a prize. So I came out of school just accepting the mediocrity, and that I was never going to be anything special, but I was neither going to be nothing. I was going to be okay.
Okay.
And I joined the Air Force. I wanted to see the world, get away from where I was brought up, from school. And somebody, once I joined, identified that I had more potential and brought me out of myself, shall we say. And that took me on a huge journey, because when I first joined up, a commissioned officer was like, oh, God, you wouldn't dare talk to them.
Yeah.
And 10 years later, I was there as senior officer. So it was a journey of helping me find myself, helping understand what I could offer, what I could give. I had to go off to university to get a degree, I had to get a commission. I then had to get promoted within the engineering branch that I was in, and then I was at senior officer. So actually there's another lesson there in when you have a vision and you realise it without setting a further vision, there's a certain, well, actually I thought this was going to be awesome, but it's just quite ordinary, and there's another level above it. So the wellness comes out of, passion for wellness comes out of really wanting people to realise their potential, not be stressed, not be above their capability. But I've seen so many people that I know that have accepted that mediocrity that I talked about.
Yeah.
And yet when you get into that workplace, you need to be the best that you can be. And I think lots of people hold themselves back, fall short of their potential. So it's I'm the mindset coach, as you know, and it's that mindset of really going for what it is, your dream, and not stopping short, not selling yourself short. So the wellness comes in more that side than a physical wellness or a exercise wellness. It's around just being the best that you can be and being happy and comfortable with yourself in that place.
Okay, cool. What? So many things you just said in that. Yeah. I'm like, I don't want to sit there staring at my iPad, but you'd finish on a really good one, being happy and comfortable. So I personally have gone from, I don't know whether or not I showed you the before and after picture of what I used to look like 10 years ago. It's quite fun to show people that picture because they don't recognise me. So I used to be 4 stone heavier than I am now. And one of the things that we obviously within the Wellness Academy have a mutual friend now, Ben, that connected him and I was a passion for teachings of a particular guy, a guy named Tim Ferriss. And what got me into him, for example, was his book, The 4-Hour Body. I did a diet from that book and lost 49 pounds in 4 months. And it like drastically changed not just the way that I looked, but also the way that I felt about myself, the way that I behaved, the way that I performed, the way that I operated on a day-to-day basis. But that was a transformational change because of the diet that I did. I still remain, though, with things left over from that. So, you know, we all have things in the back of our mind that control us on a day-to-day basis we might not be aware of, some of them good, some of them bad. How do you help people through that then, with regards to helping people feel happy and comfortable within themselves? Because I know day to day, that is not always me.
Okay, it depends who you're talking about really and where they're coming from.
Okay.
But principally, I'm after people setting their goals where they want to be and working towards that more than looking back on problems that they've had or they got that sort of bog them down. I don't know, we didn't mention this, but I tend to play quite a lot of management games with teams and organisations. I've done a lot of team building.
Okay.
And there's a great game, it's called Sabotage. And you split the teams up and you give them quite a few pieces of Lego. I don't know whether I'm a trademark, I meant to mention that.
Other
bricks are available. Yeah. And in another room, you've got a little model that's been built, just a few bricks that have been put together with different colours. And each team's role or task or job is to replicate the model in the other room, but they can only send one person at a time to have a look.
Okay.
And then come back, and it's a race between the teams. And then you throw a spanner in the works that you say there might be a saboteur in your group. And then you give everybody an envelope that says you are or you're not. And what's fascinating is how this exercise unpicks itself. So just to say again, you've got a group there, they've got whole bits of Lego, and they've got to try and beat the other group to replicate the model that's in the other room, and they can only send one person in at once to have a quick look, come back, try and remember the order of the bricks, and then partially build it, and then they send somebody else in there. And what tends to happen is teams send somebody in there and they start looking for somebody who's possibly a saboteur, i.e. the negative. And whether you have put a saboteur in the group or not, at the end of the exercise you say, and it doesn't really matter whether they built it, it's the process of going through it. You say, do you think there's a saboteur in the group? And they'll say, oh yeah, I think it was you, Dan, because you got that brick wrong, or you only brought back 2, memory of where 2 bricks went, not 3 or 4 like everybody else did. And they're always looking for the negative in people, whether you had a saboteur in the group or not. Where I'm going with this is the group that succeed is the one that focuses on the results, not trying to find the saboteur, which is more the negative.
Yeah.
So what I would say to work with people is if you set your goal and work on it every day, what you've got to do, baby little steps, you maybe haven't got time to worry about some of the negative stuff. Now, I did say there were 2 types. If you've got somebody who is got particular challenges with thinking more positively, then there's a number of exercise about identifying negative thoughts and taking them captive and then getting rid of them and realising that they maybe don't come from you. Yeah. We talked about you've got your conscious, you've got your unconscious.
Is this our Hawaiian principle that you have great fun naming, or is this...
Yeah. Ho'oponopono.
That's the one.
Ho'oponopono. But anyway, so we've got your conscious, your subconscious, your superconscious, and it's really about connecting with your superconscious, which is when you're more creative and you've been able to get rid of negativity. Okay. And there's actually a great phrase. You might be asking me later on about some of the things that I've picked up as strategies that I use. And there was one. I was in a job role a few years ago, and somebody rang up and had a right go at me for something that was nothing to do with me, but they had a right go at me. And it was a Friday night. I used to have a 2-hour drive back home from this job, And I carried that problem and annoyed frustration, even though it was nothing to do with me, for about 2 hours on the drive, and then I went down to the pub with my family, and it was another 2.5 hours before somebody managed to break me out of that mood. And I thought, that's not fair. It was nothing to do with me, and I've been, not suffering, but carrying that for the last 4.5 hours. So I went on a little journey, and I came across this: if anybody else makes you mad, glad or sad, you've been had. So I posted that up on my office wall. If anybody else makes you mad, glad or sad, you've been had.
Okay.
So a nice little rhyme to remember it by. What it really means is that if somebody's action generates an emotional response in you that you wouldn't necessarily choose, you're the fool. Now, if you tell me that your dog was run over and you're really sad, I can choose to have empathy with you and be sad with you. But I choose that.
Okay.
But if you do something that then makes me annoyed and there's no really reason for me to be, i.e. I didn't do anything wrong, I've been had. And so, and I've used that all the time with my family, and it's really, really difficult to actually apply it, but as a principle in remembering it, that you take responsibility for your own emotions. If somebody else does anything that causes that, then there's other issues at play. And essentially, that's the Ho'oponopono principle.
Okay. So I really like that one. And I think, I can't remember if it was what we both shared a common practice recently with regard to the Wellness Academy in essentially discussing some of the, I think we had a question, what's the best piece of advice you've had? Or if there's, what thing have you really learned? And you correctly remember that one thing that I want to use to tie together a lot of our Wellness Academy podcasts are 3 questions at the end. And if I was to be asked one of them in terms of mental wellness, it's the understanding and the realisation that we get to control our emotional state. It's not easy to do. Sometimes it's near on impossible to do. But at the same time, I'm a firm believer of, if someone gives me a piece of advice and in doing it, I'm allowed to take positive control over my own life, I'll give it a go, rather than just completely dismissing it. And I don't know whether or not you've experienced this yourself before, but in my years of teaching martial arts, I know that telling my students, you're in control of your emotions, I tell that to them. I get some positive faces, and I also get some, I'm not sure I agree with that faces. But yeah, I think that, is there anything else that you use with that to remind yourself of it, or are there any connecting theories with? Because some people listening and watching will have heard that idea before, but something can become cliche, can't it? And we can dismiss it. Oh yeah, I heard that. But if I'm not doing it,
well, actually, I think it's, as I said, it's really very, very difficult to apply, but easy to think about it or say it. And so, where I've taken it to the next stage is identifying where you either have a negative thought or you have an emotion that you've not chosen, and reviewing what either has caused it or the situation around it, and then trying to make sure either that doesn't happen again or having a strategy for dealing with it. And there are lots of these things that you can do. So one particular, I work quite a lot with businesses and their teams to, again, get the best out of the team and the business, and typically small businesses. And one of the things I promote is something called the experience economy, which is at your workplace, it's like a stage, it's a performance. And what you find is that people bring in their issues, their emotions from the home life into work. In fact, they also take their issues and emotions from work into the home life. Mm-hmm. So again, I create for them, as a way of overcoming this, a picture of you leave your issues from either home or at work, if you're going the other way, in a case at the door.
Okay.
And you step into the workplace like an actor would, so acting the part of the role that you want to be at work.
Okay.
And so, and likewise, you do the same. If there's issues at work, you put them in a suitcase, metaphorically, leave them at the door, release them, and then pick up the issues from the home life, because we all have them, we've all got them to deal with, and it's about being able to compartmentalise and not carry them over. And there's another strategy that I've heard used called the trouble tree. If there's a tree in your drive, you just park your troubles on the tree on the way in, and then on the way out, you pick them up again. And it's actually surprising how much smaller they look over on the next day. They sort of shrink overnight.
Okay.
So it's about, I think, understanding that we all have...
I'm going to have that one, the trouble tree.
Yeah, no, it's a good strategy. I often use a suitcase, but I have heard the trouble tree used, and it can be very effective, very effective. And I did hear, I can't remember what it wasn't a podcast, it was a talk by somebody who said, the first 30 seconds or the first 2 minutes when you arrive home, especially if you've been away, is the most important.
Okay.
And if your partner's at home looking after the kids and you arrive home from being away for a few days or whatever, and what happens is often, you're driving up, you're shattered, and you just can't wait to get home, have that drink. So you open the door, throw the keys down, the kids jump on you, say, oh, not now, just give me a minute to rest. And then when you've had a rest, in a couple of minutes, the kids are not interested in you anymore. So the key is to, if you've been away, is driving home, just park the car a couple of hundred yards from your home, put on your favourite record or something, get a track, get into a good mood, and when you go in, give yourself over to the kids or your partner just for those first few minutes, and then they'll leave you alone, and then you can sort of go and unwind in the bath or have your beer or glass of wine.
Like that.
And so, it's just little things in analysing how we interact, how we work, that can just make a huge difference. And that strategy saved marriages. Mm. Just those first few minutes when you arrive in, be in that right mindset to give out. And so, for me, the mindset is about being fulfilled yourself so that you can give out. Mm-hmm. And if you can give out, there's a law of sowing and reaping. You sow into somebody else with a smile and it comes back in spades. And so that's my journey in wellness.
Have you always been like this? My perception of trying to be a commissioned officer, for example, coming from a position, as you freely admit, of feeling like you were going to be the 11th guy out of and you only needed 10. To then be able to do what you did in the RAF, to get to where you are now, you definitely come across, even in the short period of time that we've been talking, as somebody that very much is in a place where they are fulfilled, and you then you've got energy or whatever you would call it to give away without being one of those people that's only half full. If you're only half full and you try and give away, you end up depleting yourself, don't you? But if you're fulfilled, I think you almost have, like, for want of a better phrase, reserves. Yeah. Have you always been like this?
I think I feel I'm special. I'm not academic, and it can annoy me, the school system that is just looking for a few really academic special people, and everybody else is the also-rans. And it does seem unfair that the same people are the captain of the sports team, the popular girls and boys that everyone wants to go out with, and the prize winners, and then there's everybody else. Schools are a bit better these days in trying to identify skill sets in people. So I'm not academic, so I sort of more struggle through the academics. I'm okay at sport, but I'm not the best. But I believe in that I'm special. I mean, there's nothing special about my upbringing. They're very stable, loving parents, but nothing extra special there. But I just feel that, each and every person is unique, and I can't remember the story, but we're one of 10,000 little tadpoles to reach the egg. So we're
10,000 and the rest, I think. But
we've all won that. Yeah. We've all won that race. So it's about realising that, and I think everybody has a story. Everybody has something to offer. Everybody has something to give if people are prepared to listen to it. And so for me, wellness is about being in a place where you can listen and give out and sow and reap, as I say. So I always felt different or special in that sense, but it took the world to beat me down. But when somebody connected with me and also identified that...
And was that in the RAF?
That was in the RAF. Yeah. That was just an officer who just said, I think you've got more potential than we're using.
Yeah.
Can we encourage you? And I love people being interested. I love being encouraged. And that's my love language, for want of a better expression, that will get the best out of me. But I can happily be, sit in the background, but I can also be out there as a leader, which I did, in that forum.
Yeah, amazing. When you think about your role at Wellness Academy, being head coach, you mentioned, of course, and I've always got the impression that you thoroughly enjoy working with businesses.
And people.
Yeah,
people
of course. Yeah, definitely.
So,
yeah. And do you... I'm thinking about anybody listening or watching that they can certainly take already things like, I would be able to write down way more than I have if I didn't feel like I'd be sat there like this rather than listening to you. But as far as individuals go, let's say I'm listening to this or I'm watching this for the first time. I've started to clock on that the word wellness, along with the word mindfulness, along with the word mindset, has become a little bit more regular in my vocabulary. Do you know what I mean? I see apps on my iPhone now, and or my Android phone. I see the newspapers, and if I go to Waitrose do a magazine every month now that seems to be.
You know why that is, don't you?
I don't.
Your reticular activation system has been fired up.
Okay, cool. Let's say my reticular activation system is fired up, and
you know what that is, don't you?
Go on,
your RAS. It's a little muscle between your conscious and your subconscious that piques your interest in things and allows you to see things. So if I say to a group, as I do when I'm training, anybody see a yellow car on the way in today? Nobody will know.
Yeah.
I don't mention it again, and then people send me a text or an email saying, "Oh, I saw that yellow car on the way home." That's because I've piqued their reticular activation system for that subject of a yellow car. And this is why setting goals works.
Okay, yeah.
Because you're saying, I want. And when you say I want or I'm going to get, you're starting to look for things. And Darren Brown did an experiment in some village. He tried to find the most positive person and the most negative person. And he tracked the most negative person's walk to work.
Yeah.
And he placed a £20 note on the floor. They never saw it. The most positive person, £20 note on the floor, they saw it. And it's because they're expecting it. It's because they're looking for things. And one of the definitions I like is look. And look is defined as where opportunity meets prior planning. Mm-hmm. So you prepare for something and then you go out looking for it. And people who realise that, then other people think, oh, they're just lucky. But you're almost preparing for it. You're preparing for opportunities. So when you've now come across a Wellness Academy, you're now peaked and you will see all the magazines with wellness. There'll all be articles on the radio. They'll be on the TV. You see it everywhere. I'm doing it as well. It was always there before.
Yeah.
And do you know how many marketing messages you see every day? Thousands, 10,000. But if you're actually looking for a particular product, you will see that marketing because you're looking for it.
Where would you suggest, what would somebody start with? So, confess yourself as being passionate about the mindset.
Yeah.
There are a million different... It can sometimes feel overwhelming. And I don't know whether or not anybody else can agree with me, but I sometimes think it's... You hear 10 things you want to do, and you feel like, unless I'm doing all 10, I'm not going to do it then. If you had to coach someone from moment one in terms of their wellness, and like we say, wellness it's not I've got a great mind or I've got a great body or I've got a great job or I've got a great car or I've got a great wife. We want all of this, right? We want to try and do our best to have a round wheel, not a, do you know what I mean? Where would you start?
I'd start with doing a self-analysis of your self-talk.
Okay.
How you talk to yourself. Are you encouraging yourself or are you pulling yourself down? Are you saying, I'm not worthy, I don't deserve that, or I'm looking for the opportunity to? So it's about, for me, taking all negative thought, very easy to say, very difficult to do, but take all negative thoughts captive. Take on a much more positive persona, so whatever you say, make it positive. So, and what you think, make it positive. So stop gossiping about other people, stop pulling other people down. Do an audit of your self-talk and what you say and start reducing, because it's very difficult to cut something out from just straight away, reducing any negative self-talk and any negative things that you say. And the trouble is, gossip is, we all do it, but try and think, is it really helpful? Is it really building the other person up? I know we're talking about people behind their backs, which isn't very good anyway. So just do an audit, self-talk and what you say, and just reduce and try and get to zero. And you'll find a complete lift in how you feel about yourself, how you feel about other people.
Okay.
One of the things that I say, because I'm often trying to encourage people to feel good about themselves and feel good about people. If you think, right, the next person who's going to walk through that door in your office, they're going to give me the answers to this week's lottery. I'm going to really enjoy when they come in and tell me that. And when they come in, you will smile. And you will be... I'm a huge believer in how much of our communication is non-verbal. 93% is non-verbal. And so we give away what we think without realising it through our micro-expressions on our body. So we have to prime ourselves to want to... we don't like everybody, but it's better to be thinking... Right, I'm really going to enjoy my conversation with Dan. I'm looking forward to what I can learn by our chat, and then I'll enjoy that more than if I just came in thinking, oh, do I want to chat to Dan today? He might ask some awkward questions. So, you're setting yourself up there for having a more difficult time. So it's about being positive. And I know it's easy to say that, and I know some people find that really difficult, but it's the mindset to get into, and it's about... looking for how you can do it.
Yeah.
I used to hate Brussels sprouts. Okay?
Okay.
Why are we talking about Brussels sprouts? I used to hate Brussels sprouts. My son came along and I thought, do you know, I don't want him to turn out like me and not like Brussels sprouts. So every Christmas, because we only used to have them, when he was very young, I used to eat the Brussels sprouts. Oh, that's gorgeous. Oh, just like chocolate, lovely Brussels sprouts. And I can't remember when, but I now like Brussels sprouts. So there was a point when I just convinced myself to like Brussels sprouts. And then, hey, heck, I do. And now we have them regularly, and I like them. Okay. And so it really highlighted how what we tell ourselves and what we keep reminding ourselves is how we live out in reality. If you want to change that, you just have to change what you think. And some people don't like this, but they fake it till you make it. You act like it until it actually is a belief. Yeah. So there are some people who don't like that particular expression because it's a fakey type term. Yeah. But, if you want to do something, you act like somebody who would do that would, and then you can almost convince yourself that that's the place.
Amazing. So I know we're tracking back, but I'm keen to understand how, I don't know when it was that you were in the RAF. You mentioned, I think, 10 years to get to the commissioned officer stage. Yeah. I'm going to assume you didn't get your commission and then go, cool, that's that done, see you later. There will have been a period of time we spent as a commissioned officer. Yeah. You were involved in wellness before the formation of Wellness Academy. Oh, yeah. When did you start becoming a coach?
All right, I'll fill out the journey.
Maybe not all, but do you know what I mean? But
for the rest of that time.
Yeah, definitely.
I did a first career. I did 20 years.
Okay.
So after 10 years, I was commissioned. And then I started helping groups that were in the ranks that wanted to become commissioned. So I started coaching them. Okay. And I realised that because of my background, I love to identify potential in people, and in fact, potentially everybody.
Did you take it upon yourself to do that, or was that...
I was part of a group that did that, okay. Yeah. So, but if I had people that worked for me and I thought they had unfulfilled potential, I would encourage them. Not to tell them where to go, but just to explore...
Well, like the guy did with you.
Yeah, what that might look like. So I did a full career... Well, sorry, not full career. I did... 20 years, and there's a natural exit point that you can get out at age 38. If you don't get out at age 38, you stay on till 55. I had one of the best jobs in the Air Force. I used to be responsible for satellites. I had 5 satellites within my responsibility. I had a team of 30 officers. I had a multi-million-pound budget. I'd track across to America regularly. Probably best job in the Air Force. Well, I think it would be. And I could have stayed in and been looking at future provision of satellites and had mega budgets. But my children were very small, and it would have meant them in boarding school, and I would have only seen them high days and holidays.
Okay.
So I opted to leave and take up a job in Civvy Street, as they say. And I went to work at Heathrow Airport for a few years.
Okay.
And that meant that I was with the family and with the children as they went to school.
Doing what at Heathrow Airport?
I did a number of jobs. I was head of ground operations engineering. I was a property engineer. And I actually paid Heathrow's gas, electricity, water bill just before I left. Did a few years there, and I thought still the theme was giving back something of what I'd been given. And I thought, where am I going? You know, I used to meet with all my senior managers in the canteen, and they'd all be talking about the pension, which was another 30 years away, 20 years away. And I thought, I don't want to just eke my life out like this. And so I tried to get a secondment into a charity, and they wouldn't give me one at my level. So I resigned. I resigned to take up a charity job running an activity centre.
Oh, wow.
You know, the sort you send your nephews, nieces, children to,
okay.
where the kids who maybe are not very good academically come out of their shells, and the teachers see the good things that they have to give, and it helps them back in the classroom. So I never went to one of these when I was growing up. But I knew the potential, because I would have probably shone if I'd have gone when I was younger. So I did that for a few years, and I helped them get a lot of development money to redevelop the place, and had about 80 staff and 350 beds, so it was an activity centre. So again, it was always about helping people realise their potential, and you know, when you sowing and reaping, when you help, it comes back in spades. So I did that. From there, unfortunately, it was a charity job, so it was a huge salary drop. We needed to generate some more family income, and I set up my own company doing training, team building, coaching. Amazing. And there's been that journey through that to coaching people. Sometimes it's people who just ask for it. Sometimes it's financially driven. Sometimes it's through working with teams in a business. Sometimes it's running what I call mastermind groups, where you get a set of business owners in a room and really encourage them to help each other with their challenges. Running a business can be a lonely place, and they like the opportunity to have a caring and sharing group of effectively a non-executive board, so I facilitate those groups as well. So, and then that took me to a journey where I met a partner who was also interested in wellness, and we said, how can we take this to a different level? How can we impact more people? And so we set up the Wellness Academy.
Amazing. Are there themes that you've found, most common questions, you know, most common challenges in what you've done from stage to stage to stage? Because like you said, there's a running theme for you of giving back, of what you reap you sow, etc., or you sow you reap. Would you say, would you expect then, for example, people listening or watching at home to have not common but a thread that you found in what you do that you can help with, that you can give a takeaway, a tactic, a routine, a whatever?
It's like this positive bit. As we're growing up, we have 7 negatives thrown at us by society, family. You know, if you don't work harder, you'll not turn into anything, or you know, even bullies at school. We have 7 negatives thrown at us for every positive.
Okay.
The counter to that is it takes 7 positives to offset a negative. So somebody says something negative for you, somebody then says something positive. It doesn't offset it. You need a lot more positives coming to you. And I had an example with my daughter, actually, many years ago. She went off to buy a gilet in Chester. I think she paid £100 for this, and she walked in, and it was like too small. And she says, "Oh, what do you think?" You know. And I didn't actually say anything except probably it's all right. But my face gave it away. She says, "You don't like it, do you?" "Ah, no, that's all right. Yeah, no, it's fine." But she knew I didn't like it, and it took me the next literally 7 times. "Hey, that suits you. That looks really nice." Having to eat a bit of humble pie because I just still think it was a bit small. Before it was then forgotten about, and so I think I'm trying to sort of say the theme that's running through is to just try and be positive.
Okay.
And the trouble is, our natural state is to be negative. Why is all the news negative? We always look for the negative. We always see negative in other people. I always see negative things. And so I have to take that thought captive. There's a little exercise you can do. You can say 1 + 1 = 2, 2 + 2 = 4, 3 + 3 = 6, 4 + 4 = 9. And you show people that. You write it on a board and you show a group of people, you say, what do you see? They all will see the wrong sum. Nobody will say there's 3 right sums.
Yeah.
We don't see the positive. And so the strategy is to look for the positive. I think somebody said that, when you wake up and you have that shower, just enjoy that fresh water splashing around you. 100 years ago, only kings had showers. So, enjoy what we've got in fresh water. Enjoy fresh air, as long as it's not in central London. But, you've got to see the little moments in life and value them and have gratitude for those to offset all the things that are going to go wrong. And so, it might be that you've got to stop listening to the news sometime because you just soak up more and more negative from that. And it comes out. What goes into us comes out. So it's taking that captive, like I said, that negative thoughts captive and blocking it and saying, no, I'm not accepting that thought. Because our mind has a mind of its own. Our legs, our limbs, everything else we control. But our mind will just go off and do its own thing, which is another principle of the chimp paradox.
It's funny, we talked about that beforehand, and I can't remember who I was discussing it with the other day. But I think the chimp paradox is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's the chimp paradox, and then I was researching something for a future podcast with another guest, and I come across called the triune brain or the triune brain. And then at the same time I was recently researching a course called The Art of Breath, where within that it was discussing the idea of a subconscious brain and a conscious brain. And then hearing another thing, I feel like possibly same thing repackaged in many different ways. But as you say, there is an understanding where we've got a reason why in the chimp paradox, for example, the chimp notices the negative. And we'd talked about this beforehand and would be really keen for you to help me understand it, if nothing else, but definitely anybody watching, etc. What's your understanding of why our chimp likes to notice the negative so much?
It's about survival, and I told you I wasn't that academic, so I can't remember all the different names for our brain, limbic and all of that. I can't get that. But so when I read a book like that, I try and think, what's it trying to say? What can I take from it? How can I apply it? And how can I get a benefit? And how can I help others? So they're the sort of questions that I ask without really trying to understand it to the nth degree and to the theory of it. So the chimp paradox is a model, and it's Professor Steve Peters' book and his model of roughly how our brain looks. But it's very, very simplified. And I've seen some people take it apart and say, oh, no, it's not quite like that. Okay. It's like this. But essentially, we have an emotional part of our brain that responds first to any stimulus. And this part of our brain comes through evolution from a long time ago when we were cavemen or reptiles, or that's where it's got the name chimp from, essentially. And its main purpose is to help us thrive and survive.
Okay.
So it's looking for safety of you as an individual, safety of your tribe, and I can never get this, procreation of the race. The sex bit.
Yeah.
So that's its pure motives. And if it feels that any of those are challenged or at risk, it fires off and becomes very active, and it fires chemicals all around the body to prepare you for fight or flight, which you've probably heard of.
Yeah. I actually heard now that we're supposed
Freeze.
to call it... Yeah. You've heard this?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the idea being apparently unless you trained as a mammal to do so, it's apparently flight or freeze. And they claim to have done research in danger
flight
situations where apparently a natural is either to run away or to make yourself small. But yes, you can hear fight or flight or freeze. But yes,
this emotional part of your brain kicks into a stimulus. Where you're not threatened, it just sits quietly, and your rational brain kicks in half a second later. And the rational brain is the one that's developed to be community people. So it worries about what people think about you and wants to fit in with the crowd, be more sociable. And so that's the brain that we operate with. And both of the chimp and the human brain fire into a computer which automates our responses. So where we've done something a number of times, we then operate it by habit.
Okay. So if the chimp is let loose often enough,
the computer
just
sits there,
will run that program.
Yeah. If the chimp sees something that is not a surprise or a shock or it's aware of, it's seen it before, it just checks with the computer and says, oh no, that's all right.
Okay.
So it doesn't fire off.
Okay.
So, but where this kicks in for us, if you ask somebody who doesn't want to talk in public, to talk in public, their chimp immediately fires up and says, "Ooh, you haven't done that before. People might laugh at you, and that might threaten you, your self-esteem, your confidence, your ability as a person." So your chimp will block you or stop you or fire off all the chemicals that restrict that, or you'd say, "Oh, I'm never doing that," or whatever it is. Whereas if that's something you can do as normal, your chimp is just quietly feeding away, and this is the model, it doesn't engage, and the rational brain says, well, that actually would be useful because it would help your career, and give it a try, and what can go wrong, and even if people laugh, it doesn't really matter. So and what happens is our chimp, our emotional brain, is active all the time for any situation that we feel a bit threatened in. And of course, as we're interacting with people all the time, there's potentially threatened situations. Where it's a benefit, of course, is where there's a dangerous situation. Cars coming towards you, child's in front of you, you don't think, oh, should I push it or pull it? It's about 3 feet that way and 2 feet this way. It will take me 2 seconds. You act. Yeah. And then your chimp does that. It just acts. And you can't even understand how you've processed it. So people would say, when a pond was iced up and a dog fell in, and somebody went to save it, and someone said, "Oh, you must be really brave to do that, at risk." And people say, "Well, I just didn't think about it." And all these situations, the terrorist situations like London Bridge, where people do things that are either superhuman or they wouldn't think they'd do rationally. It's because their emotional brain is kicking in to help survive or thrive as a species or as an individual. So, that's. And in a very, very day-to-day perspective, again, this is one of those tips where, in a working environment, a colleague comes in late for a meeting and, "Oh, you're always late." That is going to fire off the chimp in the other person. Because they're not always late. I mean, maybe most of the time, but not always late. So their chimp fires off. And if you have a chimp-to-chimp conversation, it's not very positive. And so when I am working with people and they say, well, such and such winds me up, or this upsets me, or that is, I say, have a think about whether it's the real person, because your chimp is not the real person. In fact, this is another tip. His book said that the brain doesn't mature till 25. So until my son was 25, it wasn't him. So therefore, all the things that he would have done to upset me, that he used to do, I could just let it go. So back to the situation where it's people interacting. If somebody upsets you because they've done something, just think, is it their chimp? And wait and see if they still say the same a few seconds or a minute later. Don't respond to it. And that is a hugely powerful strategy in the workplace to smooth over all these emotional battles that tend to happen. Yeah. And I could give you a few examples, but I don't think it's. I think you get the point.
Really cool. One of the things I remember we talked about that I wrote down, you mentioned, and I actually texted you about this the other day and didn't write down the name of the doctor, but I know you'll remember exactly what I'm talking about, because I think one of the main takeaways from it for me, which I really like and agree with, I wrote down lead with love. And we discussed a doctor, and I'll preempt it a little bit and you can pick it up, I believe he went into a ward psychotherapy ward, for want of a better phrase. The idea was that he'd
criminally
been
insane.
Yeah, every other doctor previously had failed.
Yeah. All right, I'll tell you the story. Yeah, because it's had quite a profound effect recently, and this is the Ho'oponopono that we mentioned earlier on, and it's taken me a long time. Hop on a pony. That's how I can remember it. Ho'oponopono.
We'll go with hop on a pony.
Hop on a pony, yeah. And this is a technique, so which I'll share in a minute. But the backstory for this is this guy. It's a Hawaiian healing ritual, Ho'oponopono. Been with them thousands of years, and this medical doctor applied for a job in an asylum for the criminally insane, full of murderers, rapists, and not
the worst
particularly
of the worst.
Pleasant characters. And this place was described as hell on earth. The staff kept leaving, they didn't stay there, and they needed a medical doctor on site. He applied for the job. He was the only one, and he said, I'll take the job, but only if I can do it my way. And the powers that obviously be said, well, we've got nobody else, so we'll take him, and at least we've got a doctor on site, a medical doctor on site. And over the 2 years, the book that I first read, it said he'd healed everybody. Subsequently, I've done more research because I like finding out whether this is just somebody who's using it to promote their idea of something.
Method, yeah.
And so I found another source that said he healed everyone but one. So healing quite a lot of people.
High success rate.
High success rate, yeah, I agree with that. And the way he did it is by never visiting the patients. So, hey, what's all that about? And what he did is he just used to, so the books say, sit in his office and look at their records. So he'd read what they'd done, and obviously you look at somebody's record and murdered loads of people and done some horrible things, and probably look at their picture that maybe isn't the most best looking picture. Yeah. And he felt he what's the right word? He felt the emotions that would cause him to create, and he would sort of really feel them, and then he would ask for release of those emotions. So the responses that it was creating in him, probably hatred and anger, he would ask a higher divinity,
whatever
God
that might
or
be.
nature, whatever you come from in that sort of belief, to be released from that. And he would do that again and again and again, and over the two years, I think it cites, he healed them. Now, I have my own view on this, that he would have therefore been running the place with all the staff in a different way, in a way of loving these people. And that would have worked on the staff to also start trying to see them in a different light. And I think, so this is just me, that's what probably changed them. I don't know whether you've come across it might be something called Pygmalion, where you get what you expect. They did this psychology experiment with teachers. They took a class of really difficult, delinquent kids and told this teacher these were really clever kids and they were going to be the best. Another class of really clever kids, and they told the teacher, these are a bit disruptive. These kids are probably not going to do well in the exams. At the end of the year, the kids that were clever, but they were told the teacher they were not very clever, didn't do very well in the exams, and the ones who were not meant to do very well and disruptive, but they told the teacher they were clever, did really well in their exams.
I heard it called a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's another word for it.
Yeah, like that you...
So I think that the doctor changed his own view of what he felt, so that, remember I said a lot of our communication is non-verbal, so he would start feeling love for these guys, sorry for wanting to help them. Yeah. That would have impacted the staff. I've also done a little bit but I'm only in the middle of this research. There's something that says if we are full of love, we impact from our heart about 8 feet around us, and we can impact people around us, and hence healing out of that. So another book I'm looking, Love 2.0, says that if we can get full of love, get rid of all the negative feelings and thoughts, we turn into a powerhouse of our superconscious and become able to connect with our creativity, and walking around like you're on cloud 9, and then And for me, that's all about being at peace. Wellness is about being at peace with who you are and where you are in your situation, whatever that is. My daughter youngest daughter flew out to Sri Lanka on Easter Sunday, all the bombings. But I was totally at peace with that. She wanted to go, so I wasn't going to stop her. So I was at peace with that decision that she wanted to go and supportive of her for doing that. So had anything happened, I wouldn't have lived in regret because I knew that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. Because
I was at peace with that decision. So that, to me, is that situation. And just to make sure we finish this off, the Ho'oponopono technique is, and taking every negative thought captive, first of all, you say, I'm sorry for that thought.
Okay.
I'm sorry for that emotion. So if you judge somebody, you say, I'm sorry for that thought. That's not a positive thought. Sorry. Please forgive me. And you're asking divinity.
Whatever, person.
And then thank you. I'm receiving that forgiveness for that thought. And then I love you. I love you. So you say those 4 things. So take every thought captive, saying, I'm sorry. Some of our thoughts come from ourselves and our experiences and our upbringing. Some of our thoughts come from a few ancestors back, and some of them come from the generations. You know, we are born with a DNA that has certain behaviours in it from a few generations back and from time immemorial. And so lots of things that we feel are not us, but we still need to release them. So taking every negative thought captive, and in doing this I've realised how many only little negative thoughts I have all the time. You know, that driver who cuts in front of you, or anything that winds you up. Release yourself.
So 4 things. The 4 things are again.
You say, sorry.
Yeah.
Please forgive me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love you.
Okay.
So love. Fill in that void.
Yeah.
You've created a little void now where that negative thought was, and you want to fill that with love.
Yeah, that's cool.
I got a little story here that we got time for, about a couple of stories here. This one's about 2 monks. Have you heard this one? 2 monks, one old, one young, travelling from one monastery to another.
Go on, possibly, but go on. It's ringing a bell.
So I'll read it to make sure I get it right. They were celibate monks, not even allowed to direct their gaze at women.
Okay.
So after a long walk, they came to a river which they had to cross, and the river was flooded, and there was no way that they would get across without getting wet. One lady was also at the bank of the river waiting to cross. She was weeping because she was afraid to cross on her own. The monks decided to cross the river by walking through the relatively shallow part of the river. Since the lady also needed to get to the bank, the older monk, without much ado, carried her on his shoulders, and soon they reached the other bank, where he set her down. The lady went her way, and the 2 monks continued their walk in silence. The other monk was really upset, finding the other monks' act disturbing. As per their injunctions, they were not allowed to even look at a woman, let alone touch a woman. And yet the other monk carried her on his shoulders and all the way across the river. After a few hours, the confused monk couldn't stand the thought of what had happened, which kept filling his mind. And so he began to berate the other monk. We're not allowed to even look at a woman, never mind touch them, but you carried the woman. Which woman? Replied the older monk. The woman you carried on your shoulders across the river. The other monk paused, and with a smile on his lips he said, I put her down when I crossed the river, but you are still carrying her. Have you heard that?
No, I haven't. No.
And it's about that we carry our problems, and it's about releasing ourselves from the negativity that creates. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Please forgive me.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love you.
Amazing. So I mentioned, of course, that we were going to try and continue with a finishing theme on our podcasts here at the Wellness Academy. One of which was, the 3 questions I'd like to ask our guests. I'm always keen myself to look at different things, and I'll probably enjoy watching this back. But I'm keen from like a wellness perspective to understand what someone such as yourself, who clearly is operating, at least in my opinion, on a really high level from within this area. Undoubtedly, whilst I think you confessed at the start of our chat today maybe the physical wellness side isn't the thing which you grasp onto as much as anything else, you can't be ignoring it. Like, I know that. You can't be operating on what seems like a fantastic level mentally and ignore the physical. It doesn't work that way. So if you've got anything that you value, habits-wise or anything like that, which if it's doing nothing else but helping fuel the passion and the enthusiasm you have for what you do, does anything come to mind?
Dog walking.
Okay.
Yeah, I love walking our dog. In fact, I love dog training. So that's another whole subject for
another time.
How you get the dogs to do what you want. But I my daughter got me to go into a half marathon earlier in the year, and it was awesome.
How was that?
Because I had to dig deep. I mean, I can run 3-5 miles, no problem, but I've never done any more than 10 miles. And I was always sad as my girls were growing up and son that none of them were particularly interested in running. So whenever I went out for a run, it would be by myself. But since they've left home, they've all taken up running and keeping fit. But anyway, she said, "Dad, come on, go into this half marathon." And I did. And I set this target for 2 hours, which I achieved. But I had to dig so deep to get there. And it's a little bit like stepping out of your comfort zone and growing as a person, setting yourself these little challenges. So in terms of fitness, I go out walk. We go out walking as a family and with the dogs very regularly. Member of a gym to do a little bit of exercise. I probably don't eat the best in terms of health-wise. I should be a bit better. I could be a bit better fitness-wise, but it's that wellness to me is just about being at peace with who and where you are, so you don't live in regret. And one of the things, the techniques that you can do with people is say, imagine on your deathbed. Have you heard that one? They exercise, or your eulogy. What do you want people to say about you? And I'd rather be thought of as a great friend, person, carer, father. But I got no fear of dying, and we've talked about this. I've got no fear of death. And what's beyond it excites me. So, and again, that's a mindset.
Yeah, definitely.
I believe there's more after life, and somebody says, "Oh, but what if you're wrong?" I'm able to live my life on. Okay, if it's wrong, I've still had a cracking life by living in the expectancy of it.
Yeah.
And happiness is about the journey, not the destination. So, if the journey of life you're looking forward to something, that's the journey and happiness more than the destination. So if I die and there's absolutely nothing there, well, I'm no worse off than everybody else. So why not live in an excitement, anticipation of what's next? So as I say, I'd rather be, the legacy is a person that, you could turn to. He had integrity. He was always there for us. He helped us. And I'm not that perfect person, by the way, that you were painting. I'm not up there. I'm just like any other person. I have down days, but I have to talk myself back up. I get out of bed, take a few deep breaths and say, thank you for today. And like I said, the fresh water falling on your face that 100 years ago only kings had. The luxury of soap. And I often think back. I think back to 200 years about your phones and the cars, People, when they first came in, it was only people, billionaires or millionaires, who could afford them. Now we've all got them. We take them for granted. So stop and actually appreciate things in life a little bit more. My tips would be really.
I don't think there could be a better ending. Thank you so much, David, for your time. We're going to do this again, I think. So thank you. This is Dan Ball from Wellness Academy. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you're listening right now. You'll find a link on the episode notes. Just tap or swipe over the cover art. You'll also see some offers from our sponsor, and we hope you'll support our show by supporting them. If you like what you'd heard, we'd love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe. It really does help the show. Another way to support us is to answer a short survey at yourwellnessacademy.co.uk/survey and tell us what wellness topics you'd like to hear about. I'm your host, Dan Ball. Our producer is Scott Towns, created by our executive producer, Ben Heathcote, for Wellness Academy.